Hi, I had this idea to make a video or series of videos about the seven deadly sins of the 21st century today without any religious context. I've already made a video about laziness and how that is affecting younger generations, but today I wanted to talk about what is maybe the most dangerous sin of them all. I'm using the word sin really loosely here. It's just for the video concept, okay? Of all the seven, greed scares me the most, and I think it's the most important one for me to talk about. Well, the definition of greed is not specific to only money. I wanted to focus talking today about primarily corporate greed for money, not individual greed. And if you're looking for some examples, I'm talking about this and this and these. This is what I'm talking about. And while we're at it, let's just build a foundation with the definition of capitalism. I do think that greed can exist without capitalism, but I don't know if I think capitalism can exist without greed, or as it might be referred to in gentler capitalist terms, incentive of uncapped monetary growth. So, economic and political system where trade and industry of a country is controlled by private owners for profit. That's what I want to talk about today. For profit, when that becomes a problem. I don't think that there's inherently an issue with making a profit. I think you can make a profit ethically, but very rare and difficult. The problem that younger generations are now being exposed to as they leave school and enter adulthood is that the desire to make a profit today is not the same as what it used to be. It's this uncontrollable, selfish desire to make so much more money than could ever be necessary with no end in sight. We're now starting to experience firsthand the trickle-down effects of corporate greed. There's a lot of really nasty negative consequences. I am no means an expert in business or economics, but it doesn't take that long in a corporate 9 to 5 to realize that for-profit businesses are driven by making a profit every quarter, every year. That's just part of the baseline. That's the basics, but it's not where it ends. Profit isn't enough. There's a strong push for the profit to be permanently increasing. So if a company looks at their profits in 2022 and they made 10% profit, and then they look again in 2023 and they're still at 10%, that is not a win, even though they made a profit. They want the profit to be permanently increasing, and not just at a constant rate either, at an exponential rate. This is greed today, when wanting more than you need becomes out of control. There is no final goal. There is no ultimate number. It kind of reminds me of like an eating disorder and having a goal weight. Even if you hit it, there's a new one that immediately follows. The number just keeps getting more and more ridiculous. Even if a corporation made $1 trillion in profit, $1 trillion is unfathomable. But there's a higher number. They could still say, well, that's awesome. Let's go for 2 trillion or 5 trillion. It just gets more and more insane. There's no end. The difference between greedy individuals and greedy individuals with resources who have come together to create a corporation is that a greedy individual, their want for excess money can often just stay in their head, and they're not able to do much about it. But a corporation has the resources to be able to act upon their greed in many ways that cause a much larger negative ripple throughout society. And because of lack of a lot of regulation, the sky's the limit of which way they'd like to act upon their greed. This lack of regulation and lack of consequences is why an oil company, instead of finding a way to properly dispose of toxic waste that causes time and money and resources, or they can just dump it in the ocean and get a fine for it if they get caught. But they have so much money that it doesn't matter to them that what they've just done is unethical and has negative consequences towards the rest of the world, because their priority is making more money, not doing good. There's two big ways to make more money as a for-profit business, and the first way is to increase income, basically to have more money coming in. And one of the ways to do that is increase prices. If you keep your whole business model the same, but you up your prices a little bit, you have a good chance at making a bigger profit than you did the year before. The second way is to decrease spending or cut costs. And there's a lot of ways to do this as well, but the one I wanted to point out, because it's a major problem, is keeping employee wages low. In fact, the most profitable model of all is not paying your employees anything, basically slavery. And you don't have to pay your employees anything at all if you're using that business model. And that's a huge reason why slave owners and business owners fought to keep slavery for as long as they could, because it made them so much money. It was an amazing way in their mind of cutting costs. And just to be clear, even though slavery is illegal today, does not mean that it doesn't happen. Something being illegal doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. Corporations break the law in many ways, including implementing slavery on like a weekly basis. There are still hundreds, if not thousands, of businesses operating today that use slave labor because they value money over human rights. Everyone has their own list of values and morals that they want to adhere to, and unsurprisingly, corporations are not really honest about their values. They all have a website where they have an About Us page and they talk about their company values, and they always fail to leave out making a profit as their number one value. Maybe that's just implied, knowing that they're a for-profit business and they don't want to draw any attention to the fact that that's number one, but it is number one. That's why it's a for-profit business and not a charity. Like an example would be a large food corporation has its values as feeding the world, but you could also feed the world by donating food or keeping prices extremely low so that it's very accessible to the majority, but they're not doing that, at least not as much as they are selling food and making a profit off of it. So that really shows how profit is number one, not feeding the world. Business owners have made great use of many strategies to make a profit. And I imagine that the most regular non-business owning people also would like to make a profit in their own lives, to have more money coming in than going out, to be able to save, basically. That's how a regular person would view making a personal profit, is saving, so that they're able to account for businesses' rising costs over time or unexpected expenses coming up in the future. But unfortunately, that is not possible for the many due to the greed of the few. I don't want to oversimplify this, but being in debt is kind of the opposite of making a personal profit, and the vast majority of Americans have debt. And younger generations, millennials and Gen Z, are set to have debt at record hitting numbers in history. Even if it's not a lot of debt, or they have a plan to pay it off in the next few years. If you look at another statistic, okay, maybe you're not in the red. Over half of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So, in business terms, they're just breaking even. They don't have any extra to be able to save or invest in themselves to grow as a more successful person. And even if they're doing a little bit better and they have some in savings, over half of Americans can't afford an $1,000 emergency. So maybe they have a tiny bit of profit or savings, but not even enough, less than 1,000. So many people can't have any money in savings because their income is equal to their expenses. And I know that you can say that some people manage their money poorly, but you can't use that excuse for this many Americans. If an individual is particularly greedy, they don't have the resources that a corporation does to be able to grow their money, but they could kind of exploit themselves by valuing and prioritizing work over other life values, or they could try on their own to exploit others. But overall, most people will have a hard time turning their own individual greed into a large negative societal impact. So let's play out this scenario that has already been put in motion. Businesses keep raising their prices over time. Corporations keep their employees' wages low. Except for those people who are lucky enough to have generational wealth or to be one of the people high up at a successful corporation, most people become poorer and poorer. This has already been happening for some time now. The things they need to buy, like housing and food, are more expensive, but their wages aren't raised enough to keep up. This is what this is all leading to. This is the larger negative societal impact that I'm pointing out today, and that's wealth inequality. And just in case you're looking for a millionaire's perspective on wealth inequality,
the combined wealth, this is according to Oxfam, of the world's 85 richest people is equal to the 3.5 billion poorest people.
It's fantastic. And this is a great thing because it inspires everybody, gets the motivation to look up to the 1% and say, I want to become one of those people. I'm going to fight hard to get up to the top. This is fantastic news, and of course I applaud it. What can be wrong with this?
Really?
I hate that video. It actually makes me sick. I could make an entire video actually about the myth of meritocracy that he so clearly believes, but today we're focusing on wealth inequality. The middle class is eroding. Much more of what used to be people in middle class is now people in poverty. But the rich are richer than ever before. And there is an excellent video about this that's about 10 years old now, and I wish there was this same person would do an update. There's also an amazing website that I'm going to put in the description. You can see visually how wealth is distributed and how unequal it is. Most people vastly underestimate how huge this disparity is. It's so large. You have to see it to believe it because it's hard to even think of in your own head of how rich these rich people are in comparison to everyone else in poverty. And if these numbers look horrifying, they're only going to get worse over time because not enough is being done about this problem. The longer corporate greed goes unregulated, the worse this will become. I'm not the first person to ask this question, but it's scary to think about of how this is going to end up. What is the plan exactly when a majority of Americans can't afford a basic cost of living. 10 million people hope that someday they'll be able to pay off their loans, while one singular person wonders if they should use 1% of their wealth to eradicate malaria worldwide, or keep it in the family, and I'm sure they can pay off their great 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 grandchildren's college education. Is this fair or equitable? Will corporate greed ever face significant consequences of their unethical behavior beyond a monetary slap on the wrist? Gen Z and millennials are coming to this horrible realization that they may never be able to own a house one day. But Elon Musk, I don't know how many houses he owns, but if he wants to, he can own 5 or 10 or 300 houses. No problem. But what would he even do with 300 houses? Can't live in them. Oh, but I bet he has an idea. He could rent them out to make more profit. But what should he do with that money? Buy a spaceship? Or 3 spaceships? Or 15 spaceships? He can. He has enough money to have 15 spaceships. Or he can try, and he may not succeed, but he has enough money to try and buy off every single member of Congress. And there's a reason why people say that greed breeds corruption. So many rich people decide to use some of their money in politics for their own political gain. There's a certain point where you reach so much money that you can't even comprehend it yourself. Going from 1 trillion to 2 trillion, you don't even feel it anymore. It doesn't make an impact on your daily happiness. It doesn't improve the quality of your life. You're already as good as you could ever be. This is just gonna end up with 100 dudes with 99% of the wealth, and the rest of the country is homeless and starving. When I was looking up data for this video, I was actually checking the Federal Reserve's website about wealth inequality, and it shows how it's distributed in this country. And the category numbers were really disturbing. You can just tell the problem just by looking at how they have broken up the categories of the population. There's the bottom 50%, the next 40%, 10%, 1%, and 0.1%. Even just those numbers are so telling. 0.1% of the population has so much of the wealth that they need their own category. This is the Federal Reserve's website. It's not like pushing a narrative. It's just the government showing how wealth is distributed in this country. And then the whole bottom 50% is just lumped together because they have so little. People in poverty cannot realistically buy things that are wants, not needs, at least not regularly, unless they're willing to go into debt for them. So if you're a rich CEO selling a want, like kind of like a medium want, like a couch, you can survive without a couch. You really would like a couch for somewhere to sit. But without the middle class having a little bit extra money to spend, you don't have as many people that you can sell couches to. You don't have enough customers. The only people in this played out scenario who have money to buy your couches are your fellow corporation owners and wealthy class. But even the wealthy class only will buy so many couches. There's a limited demand.
I have started or helped start dozens of companies and initially hired lots of people. But if there was no one around who could afford to buy what we had to sell, all those companies and all those jobs would have evaporated. That's why I can say with confidence that rich people don't create jobs, nor do businesses large or small. Jobs are a consequence of a circle of life like feedback loop between customers and businesses.
What is the plan of these business owners when only 1% of the population has any money to spare to purchase their goods and their customer base has shrunken down to this? Greed has been around since forever, And I'm not the first person to make this comparison, but I think that greed of today is much like another Gilded Age, where at the same time there is material excesses to the extreme and also severe poverty running rampant. When one small group of people succeeds in hoarding almost all the money to themselves, there's not just an unequal distribution of wealth, there's also an unequal distribution of happiness. And there is a correlation between poverty and unhappiness. Because even if you have a strong community and social group and positive attitude, when you're not able to meet your basic needs, it's much harder to be as happy as those who can meet their basic needs and some of their wants. It's very difficult for me to believe that someone made $1 billion without stepping on people and making unethical decisions along the way. Maybe someone could make $1,000 that way, but not $1 billion. To see greedy people valuing money for themselves over the well-being of their neighbors, to be so selfish that their own monetary, what they have in the bank, is more important than the whole rest of the country. I hate it. It just makes me think of the statement, the love of money is the root of all evil. I know I've just talked about a lot of bad news, and this probably makes me all sound like a doomer, but I actually do believe that there are some things that we can do to fight against wealth inequality. They're not going to solve the problem completely, unless maybe if everyone did them, because if every person on earth boycotted Walmart, Walmart would have to shut down. At least I can sleep at night with these ideas that I'm going to put on the screen, knowing that I've tried, I've done what I can as an individual. My power is limited, but at least I know I can put in some effort without really feeling like it's a personal sacrifice. Every time I tell someone that I don't purchase from Amazon, they're like shocked, like how I'm surviving. And it's really not as big of a deal as you think. It's fine. If it makes sense for you, if you're able to, I encourage you to try out these ideas. I'm not sure if you enjoyed this video, but I wanted to talk about something that I really think matters. So, thanks for watching.